OWWR Pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who usually do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. But right now it is a bonus. And
Bonus.
we are discussing Martha Wells' Witch King.
Witch King.
With the sequel out yesterday.
Yes.
Queen
October
Demon,
7th.
October 7th, which Laura's actually read. So
Yes.
she will
Queen
be
Demon.
giving us, we'll be discussing Witch King today, but we will have some slight discussions of what to expect for Queen Demon.
Yeah. I'm not going to get too spoilery or too into it, but just a couple of highlights of some things.
Yeah. But Laura, do you want to tell the listeners what your experience has been with Witch King and how you brought this book to us?
So I read this book a couple years ago, Witch King, and then I was lucky enough to be able to ask Martha a couple of questions about it when we interviewed her for the podcast. And I think one of the most shocking things was and people might be listening back to some of our episodes and be like, Laura, you're remembering this wrong. But I want to say that Martha told us that she is primarily a pantser when it comes to writing. And I think that is fascinating in terms of this book in particular. But I was really interested in Martha's other works because I loved the Murderbot Diaries so much. And I think, like most people who really enjoyed the Murderbot Diaries, when it was announced that she was coming out with a new fantasy, I, like everyone else, was really interested and picked it up. And I really enjoyed Witch King a lot, a lot, a lot. Hannah, what was your experience with the book?
So my experience was mostly Laura raving about this book when she read it around the time that we interviewed Martha Wells. And I remember you had been going through like a mini reading slump at that time, I think.
Yeah.
Like I just remember you had a moment where this brought you so much joy. Like
Yeah,
you talked
this
about
was
it a
a book
lot.
that brought me out of a reading slump, actually.
And it was a weird way that it brought you out of a reading slump where I remember so many details about Laura reading this book, but you had talked about how you wanted to take it slow, how it was something that you really wanted to experience and reread certain sections. Like that was really important to you as you read this book. So I think that that's beautiful. So it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to read this and I owned it and it was on my shelves. But as Hannah does, she sometimes just like doesn't put these things to the
When Laura
forefront.
says, Hannah, read this book, Hannah immediately discards said book.
As a woman who recently got you to finally read Stephen Graham Jones, I would beg to differ that this is just a Hannah problem.
I want to say that there's probably some books that I have read recently, like a handful of books that I've just been like, don't even mention to Hannah that she should read them because you'll have greater odds of her picking them up.
I mean, there are so many books that I want you to read that you just won't do it. So, um, but I do remember a lot about how much you loved this book, which also made me worried because, like, you and I are sometimes different types of
Yeah.
readers where we enjoy different things. So I think I got a little bit nervous about how I would feel, for this one. But I have been in a reading slump this year, and I think I've been trying to look more at the fantasy I read and what I'm interested in finding more on. And I do love Martha Wells. So I got brought back to Witch King when you would actually reached out to the publishers to get Queen Demon. And so I was like, yeah, I think I finally want to pick this book up and read it. And it's incredibly expansive. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I will say I was in a reading slump while I was reading this, so that is unfortunate because I did like kind of take it into chunks, and sometimes I worried that that made me
It's
get a
an
little lost in
incredibly detailed
details.
book.
Yes.
Incredibly detailed. And here's the thing. I think that maybe some people are trying too hard with this book to remember all the details because there's a lot of
Sure.
people that I feel like the views on this series in particular are pretty polarizing. Either people really like it or they really do not like it. And I honestly think that people need to kind of go into Witch King as more of a vibes book, if that makes
Yeah,
sense, and
I
not
agree with
focus
that.
as hard on the details. Martha Wells is probably listening to this and like, no, pay attention to the details. But here's the
No,
thing.
not my book.
Stop it right now. Correct yourselves. But I really think that it's much easier to stay in the Rising World books if you're not as focused on taking in every single bit of information
Yes.
because there is so much. There's just really so much there. And again, it makes it just fascinating that Martha is a pantser, that she's not like got an entire encyclopedia full of all of this information. Because really, compared to the Murderbot Diaries, I feel like the Murderbot Diaries were like really easy breezy
Yeah.
sci-fi books that, we could kind of be like, oh yeah, well, we're
Well, I
not,
think at the
we're
end of the
willing to
day,
just let that go. These
it,
are so incredibly detailed. Even the action scenes, like the action
oh yeah.
scenes are long, sprawling. They
Yes.
they are very, very in depth. And so it's fascinating that this is the type of fantasy that she writes, because I think it's one of the more complex fantasies that I have read.
Yes, I would agree with that, and way more detail oriented than I think we're both used to because we
Hmm.
usually like and this is a soft magic system if you're looking
Hmm.
at it, but like the world building is incredibly specific and detailed,
A
and it
lot of politics as well.
yes, it does feel more high fantasy than a lot of the things that I think you
Someone
and I are
online
usually
compared
pulled
this
to.
book to Malazan, or Malazan,
Oh,
I don't know
okay,
how you say it.
yeah.
And those are books that I have specifically avoided because they look incredibly long and incredibly complicated. And when people have asked me in the past, like, are there any books that you will refuse to read? I'm like, Malazan, Stephen Erikson. I will not be reading them.
No, thank you.
But then when somebody compared Witch King to Malazan, I was like, uh-oh, that
Am I gonna
sounds
love Malazan?
that sounds like not a good deal for me. But yeah, I do think that these are probably some of the more complicated fantasy books that I've read. And I almost want to say, like, I'm you may disagree with me on this, but I almost want to compare these a little bit to N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy a little
I mean,
bit
they're
in terms
besties,
of
so
the
I
details.
yeah.
And they give a lot of similar vibes. You know what I mean?
I would agree there's certain flavors, especially
The
with the fact that it's
pacing
like
as well also seems
yes.
on board with N.K. Jemison's writing too.
I really like what you said about these being vibe books with incredibly detail
Yes.
specific things. Like I think that resonates really well with me because there were certain parts where I was very confused about what was going on, but I was
Hmm.
there for the ride because the vibe
Hmm.
was correct. And I do think that that's also kind of an N.K. Jemisin thing where there's just so
Yes.
many moments where you're like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I know I'm enjoying it.
Hmm.
And so I do think that this probably falls with this because Witch King is so good and expansive and it knows that it's expansive because if
Yeah.
you look at the front pages, it tells you all the characters you're dealing with because
Yeah,
they're
we have
like,
to have a
you're
what is
not
it
going
called?
to remember these people.
Dramatis persona or whatever
Yeah.
right at the beginning.
And so, and I mean, this book is award winning, so people
Hmm.
know that it's amazing, but it
Hmm.
is something that like spans eras, really, if you
Yes.
think about it, and follows these people through like various hard moments in their life, but also the way it
I mean, through
slows down.
genocide. I mean,
Yeah.
should we explain just briefly what Witch King is about?
Of course, we were talking about our experience with it, but let's actually dive into the story itself.
Hmm.
So, Witch King is a story that alternates between the past and the present. You're getting different parts throughout it. And it starts with a person named Kai waking
Hmm.
up as someone is trying to bind him to them and he is
Hmm.
able to suck the life out of them and just take everyone out around him and you find out that he also woke up with his friend Zaidi
Ziti.
Zidi,
I
sorry.
think that's how you say it, is Ziti.
Okay, Zidi. So he wakes up with Zidi, who you find out is a witch who has been with him for a very long time and they are good friends, but they cannot
Hmm.
find her wife. And a huge part of this book is just a woman looking for her wife.
I will say
Parent,
this book is very queer in general. Like,
yes.
honestly, I feel like it's a pretty trans book as well, because
Oh,
Kai
yeah.
is a demon, we learn, who is able to switch bodies, because there was many years ago we learned there's these dual timelines. It alternates between past chapters and a present timeline. So we're learning about what happened in the past and kind of this creation of this political coalition and how they got to where they got to. But there was this group of people who had made a pact with demons that
Mhm.
when members of their group died, that the demons could inhabit their bodies and live in them if they were able to pass on their memories and birth children into these lines.
Yes.
And these half demon, half mortal beings are witches like
Mhm.
Ziti. So we're dealing with that situation, but it's inherently very trans to me because we
Yes.
have people who are demons or who are inhabiting new bodies.
Mhm. and but there's always the sense of self that they know what gender they are, which I think is
Yes.
what is incredibly trans about this, because there's someone like Kai in his first iteration that we see in the Sereti
As
clan
a young
is a
girl,
young girl. Like he inhabits this girl's
Kyanna.
body.
Hmm.
Um and he is still Kai. He is still a
Hmm.
man. He is
Hmm.
still represented by that. And it's so trans because it's like, yeah, I have sex this way and I enjoy sex
Yes.
this way, but I am in fact a man and that is who I am.
Hmm.
And I think that
The
that's
others
so
don't question it either
no.
necessarily.
It's very like and
I mean, the marriage is questioned and like relationships are questioned, but I wouldn't say that they question the identity.
right. And like he's often, interested in like I would say he was very interested in Bashasa, who is a
Oh
prisoner
yeah,
of war and the prince heir of a city named Benesaric.
a
And
human, like one of the main mortals that we focus
yeah,
on.
and one of the people who saves Kai when he's like
Hmm.
taken in by these hierarchs who are these like magician type people who
Hmm.
kind of
Very mysterious, uh,
very genocidal.
yes, but it
uh
like their origins are very mysterious. Is I
yes.
guess what I'm getting at, and that's what we get into in Queen Demon a little bit too.
And so Kai is very much like a person who is attracted to Bashasa, and he's
Hmm.
attracted to mostly men. So
Yeah.
he is queer. Um
Yes.
and it is a very queer book. I don't think there is a hetero
Because I mean,
relationship
ZD
in
is
it.
married to a woman.
Yes. I just don't think that there is even a hetero relationship that I can think of in this entire book. So,
I don't recall one.
yeah, I don't think there is. It's
And
queer people all the way
it's one of
down.
those things
So,
where I mean, we want to know about like I think there's a lot of people that are like calling for, oh, we want more queer representation. And I think this is definitely a book where Martha Wells has created a world where it's not even questioned. Like this
yeah,
is just how things are. We don't, and I kind of appreciate that because I've read some books and the authors try to implement queer representation, but then it's a little bit over explained. Martha does not waste time explaining these things too much, where it's
it
just
is
culturally, this is how it is.
it's a person who Martha is married to a man, so I don't know if she is queer.
Hmm.
But it is someone who isn't particularly like their representation in the community isn't fully like out there,
Hmm.
but they made a queer book that isn't like this book is about queer people. It's just a wild, expansive story
Yes.
where everyone in it happens to be queer, and that's
Yep.
kind of the whole point. So I
Very well
really
put.
liked that. I think it's beautiful to see, and I think it
Hmm.
normalizes a lot of these things because Martha Wells is
Yes.
such a huge author. And her representation like always stands the test of time so far because
Yeah. I mean,
Murderbot
her
is
representation
also
in the Murderbot Diaries is great too.
yeah. So I do think that this, like Laura said, is very queer. We have ZD who is looking for her wife the entire time.
Hmm.
And then as a huge part of the present is just their search for Tayrin and Kai trying to figure out what happened because the past happens like I think quite a long time in the
Yes.
past.
Hmm.
And now they are in this present day where um Benesera is like a more established place and they're up to renegotiate a treaty and
Hmm.
the head of Beneseric now, Bashat, which is confusing if you're bad with names and you have Bashasa and Bashat, and that is
Bashasa.
confusing
Hmm.
too.
Yes.
So that was a very hard part for me to understand of which timeline we're in, and is Bashasa still alive? The answer is no. But there, like this renegotiation, there are discussions that Bashat is going to become emperor over all of the
Yes.
people, and there's a lot of political discussions like Laura was talking about is
Hmm.
that a good or a bad thing because Benes Eric was very instrumental in making sure that the hierarchs didn't get their nails into everyone and completely
Hmm.
decimate anyone who wasn't like them. But
Which
at
we
the
learned in the
same,
past that they definitely did.
they definitely did, and they killed the people who Kai was originally with, who made
Hmm.
these
Lots of
agreements.
genocide.
Yes, um,
Because
and
those they were the Soretti people. I just wanted to mention
yes,
that the Sorettis.
yes, the Sereti clan, and they were more
Hmm.
like of a grassland kind of
Hmm.
nomadic type clan.
Yeah, like an indigenous
y-
people.
I would say they were very indigenous coded.
Hmm.
And so then the hierarchs come in and colonize everything. And they talk a
Yes.
lot about the hierarchs colonization. And there's even hints. Similar to like the Irish people in Sinners, the
Hmm.
hierarchs themselves were colonized people who just
Yes.
kept taking and continuing with the colonization, which I think is
That's actually a really good comp.
yeah, thank you. I've been thinking a lot about Sinners lately. So, they definitely have all of those threads in there in the past, and then it
Hmm.
brings us forward to nowadays because we're taking a deep look at what happened to them and what's going to be happening with the treaty, which Kai
Yes.
like seems tangentially interested in, but also not interested in at all throughout this book because he's more like, "Hey, let's get ZD her wife back. Like that's what we're
Kai's
gonna
very
focus
much
on."
on a revenge arc. Like
Yeah.
this revenge arc, our next book that we'll be covering.
Join us next week.
Cat Voleur, join us next week. Um, but yeah, Kai's very much on this path for revenge. It seems like because he wakes up and there's a lot of situations that occur really quickly at the
Yes.
beginning of the book where he has been trapped in this underwater tomb basically to because his powers do not work as well when he is underwater or exposed
Yes.
to large amounts of water. So he wakes up and realizes that they're trying to control him and trap him, and he is obviously furious.
Yes.
And so then when he's unable to find Taran, it's kind of a bad situation because we can just see the storm brewing.
Yes. It's interesting because like he does just lead with anger and rampage wherever
Oh,
he
yeah.
goes. Like he's very kind to the people who deserve kindness. Like he has a very strong sense of justice where like he finds out that there are these people who like entrapped this whale and he is very concerned about like
Hmm.
I must let the whale free and I must do it in a way that protects the whale, and then they get brought onto the ship where a bunch of souls have been overtaken by these people and they're all being mind controlled, and he decimates almost everyone on the
Yes.
ship who isn't of use to him, and then he's like, oh, this mute witch who like cannot communicate, I'm going to be very kind to her. She has no idea what her past is or who she is, so
Hmm.
I understand the context for which she was stuck in,
Also,
but
that was
everyone
unique to
else on
have a
side.
character that did not speak because we have like this different way of communicating that I think was also great representation. But I
Yes.
think Kai really stands out as a character because Martha Wells, I think, is just very connected to this idea of like what humanity is driven by and like
Yes.
what makes someone human because we can have humans who have very little regard for others and their free will and their like autonomy that we then see a character like Kai, who is considered not human, have
Hmm.
a lot of regard and compassion for other beings. So I
Yeah,
think it's really fascinating to see that play out in this character.
I agree. And it's really interesting because I think Kai represents a lot of different things because they talk a lot about the demon world and how
Hmm.
structured it is or how like important it is to fall into certain scopes. And
Hmm.
Kai often finds himself someone who like brushes against those. And then when he's removed from his community, he's trying to find his identity outside of it. And
Yeah,
that's
it makes me think of how we've talked to people like obviously Hannah, you and I are two white women. Spoilers for listeners who are new to us. We are two white women. But we've talked to other people on the podcast who have shared experiences as being mixed race people
mhm.
and how they often feel like they are part of two different worlds.
Yeah.
And I think that we can kind of see a little bit of that type of representation in Kai as well, having kind of a foot in both worlds
Yeah.
as a demon and then and Kai also has to spend a lot of time learning about humanity too to gain a deeper respect for it, which I think is unique to a character who is maybe set up to be somewhat of an antagonist but is actually the protagonist.
Yeah. It's interesting that he is the protagonist because he does a lot of stuff like he does murder people and suck the life out
Oh,
of them, but
for
we're
sure.
we're very much like, no, I'm on his side. They were trying to murder
Hmm.
him or they're trying to be cruel to other people. And you're just like,
Yep.
well, sometimes bad people deserve bad things to happen to them. So I do
I
think
will
that
say
Kai,
Martha does like to write a lot of rage because we get
yeah,
that in Murderbot as well. There's a lot of rage in
that
some of these
soft
recent works.
that soft-spoken woman just has just the biggest vast of rage inside her.
She writes Godzilla fan fiction and then she writes a lot of raging out.
But yeah, I do think that like in another book, Kai would have been the antagonist that we see like in the periphery.
Hmm.
And we would have probably been following someone more like the
ZD?
spy Ramad or ZD. Like I do think you would find those characters more often, but you
Yeah.
do there's just like such a depth to Kai that I think in 2020s I'm glad that we've kind of moved away from the typical
Hmm.
protagonist where it's like, oh no, give me a
Same.
messy person who's questionable and who has rage because like who doesn't have rage in the 2020s? So
Very
like
few people.
very few people, not a lot of people who watch the news apparently, but like, um, so yeah, I do think it's nice to have someone who has rage, who has a demon like inside them, because we also find out at the end of this, like in the past, Kai gets thrown out from his own people because
Hmm.
he. Spoilers for the book. So if you haven't read the book and you're just here to be like, should we
I
read
mean,
this?
we've already
Go
spoiled
read it.
something, so
Um,
sorry, listeners. This whole episode is spoilers.
But in the book we find out that he overtakes the body of one of the expositors.
Expositors, which are like a wizard.
Yes, they're a wizard who are working with the hierarchs, are part of
Hmm.
the hierarchs, and it's a huge no-no to take over someone's body without their permission. And so
Correct.
he is kind of cast out from his own people at the end of the past, and he has to build this new community. But then in the future, we find out that one of the people who led the cause to cast him out during this very specific battle, where all of a sudden you have these demons being like,
Hmm.
we can no longer talk to you. We will go this way
Hmm.
instead. One of them, Arnefa, kind of does the same thing and is now helping the hierarchs. And there is
Yes.
this like huge dispute over who is in the right and who was doing what they needed to do to survive because these
Hmm.
demons are cut off from their homeland. They cannot go back. And so, what do they have to do to actually survive the system that they have now been placed in? And it's a very big question on like, where do your ethics lie and where
Hmm.
is that line for you?
I think also you bringing up like survival, like the question of death is something that I think is played with a lot in this too,
Hmm.
because it's like I don't know that they're necessarily immortal, but it's like really difficult to kill demons. And so we do kind of have these beings as like somewhat indestructible. And then the questioning of their value for life is brought up often, it
Yeah.
seems. And I think the stakes are made a little bit like more relevant when we bring in some mortals to the mix
Hmm.
that Kai actually cares about. But yeah,
Cute little sidekick Sancha.
yes.
uh,
Or even Bashasa, like
yes.
I think that having those characters do it does like add some stakes to the book itself and helps Kai because really this is very much kind of a reflection of Kai learning about humanity
Yeah,
and deciding his place in humanity almost
I
and
would
what
agree with
he's
that.
going to do with it because really, being rejected from the demon world, it means that he's taken out of this situation of kind of riding the line and he's forced to become human. And so he's on this path to humanity, honestly. And what is he going to do with the time and what he's learned?
I think it's interesting you put it that way because I do think that there's a lot of push and pull on humanity. And I think in a lot of these books, something that I've noticed when you have like this being who's hard to kill is you bring in people to motivate them to act because people who can
Hmm.
live forever are often not motivated by the same things because they're like, well,
Correct.
I've seen it all happen over and over and over again. And even
I
in
love
this
vampires.
I love vampires. And even in this, Kai is like, well, I was working for years before you guys even
Hmm.
thought it was an issue because I know how this works. But what gets Kai willing to fight is Bashasa being like, no, I want to fight for my people. I want independence, and it's worth it to die for these things or to
Yes.
sacrifice the people who need to be sacrificed. And Kai is motivated by that, where
Hmm.
he's like, you know what? I can make a difference. I can do this. And why not try? Like, my people, they did kill my people, they did hurt them. Like, this is worth fighting for.
Hmm.
And I do think it's always nice in these books, like, even saying, oh, it's nice that he's not a typical protagonist. It's nice showing that, like, humanity can be incredibly important to living. Like, I think that's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah. I think honestly, like a lot of Martha's work, like even though we said like they're about rage, I think they're also she's big on a found family.
Yes.
And she's also big on people, like you said, kind of coming together to realize the importance of a community and of a collective.
Hmm.
So, and how that can shape the world. So, yeah, really good point there. Because
It's
a lot of those themes are present in Murderbot Diaries too.
Yes, I agree. It's interesting the overall arc of this story because the mystery that is at the beginning is what happened to Kai,
Hmm.
where is Tayrin, and who did all this. And then at the
Hmm.
end, I think the biggest thing is like, actually, we just needed to find Tayrin because Kai knew the mystery the entire time. He
Yes.
just didn't tell us about it. And
Yeah.
it is very funny to get to the end and be like, oh, this was just political intrigue all along. And we knew.
The both books are political intrigue, like just all over the place.
That's so funny because I think that it shows it's an interesting way because at the end, like full spoilers for this book, you find out that it was Bashat all along that he wanted
Hmm.
to take Kai out because he knew Kai did not agree with creating an emperor and he wanted to be
Hmm.
in control. And Kai was like, yeah, I knew he was going to do that in the entire time. I know Ramad, this man who's falling in love with me and I'm falling in love with him. I knew you were Bashat's spy and it's all useless because I already got people on my side
Yeah.
years and years ago, so it already fell apart. He never even needed
Hmm.
to lock me in a tomb. And then it kind of lets the winds out of the sails in a weird way where you're like, "Oh, I was expecting more intrigue," but then like the
It's so
real
weird because it's hard to explain because I feel like you get all this buildup for a letdown, but at the same time it's like satisfying. Like I don't know
yeah.
how to explain it.
It's kind of like if this were a movie, it would be the twilight of them walking to a forest and being like, "Well, we're not going to fight," and walking away.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, like, and you need the buildup of the fake fight in Twilight, a
Mhm.
movie I've never seen, but I do know
Mhm.
about the ending. But you need that fake fight to like motivate it, and this entire book has been that fake fight where they're like
Kind of.
going on this thing, they have to fight the hierarchs, they have to figure out what's right, and at the end, it's like, yeah, this was not about the treaty, this was about two women fighting each other again. So,
Basically, yeah.
yeah. I do think you're right. It was satisfying though, because there's still
Hmm.
tension being built the entire time,
Yeah.
and finding out that Kai knew it's not like it is unsatisfying in a way, and it does let the wind out of the sails, but it also makes sense. Like it makes sense that this demon has who has lived for hundreds of years, like was not beget by one man of another man that he had
Well,
a
I mean,
crush
like
on
if we're
years ago.
considering that this is like a super powerful being, like
Yeah.
obviously they're going to have some sort of recognition of like what happened to them and not need to like go on this long quest. I think it's a lot of world building political intrigue is what the book actually is to try and
Yes.
also like fascinating that Tor tried to like originally market this as a standalone. Like they were like, "Oh, this is a standalone. Ha 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 ha. JK." Like,
JK.
like I think that was a weird choice to be like, this is a standalone because when you get to the end, it very much does not feel like a standalone.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a standalone. I would be really weirded out if this was what we got. I mean, it makes sense in some way, but not in other ways. So I'm
I
glad it
guess you
wasn't a
could, but
standalone.
weird.
Yeah,
Weird choice.
it is a weird choice.
Apparently, it was well received enough that we did get a second book and
Thank you.
probably a third, I would hope. Um, I don't know if this is meant to be a trilogy or if this is meant to be a larger, like, sprawling fantasy series. But yeah, it's interesting, like, when you're talking about this, Hannah, that, like, the ending of Witch King, that we have this situation where we're like, well, here's what happened all along. And then they're like, this was a standalone. Like, what?
Especially when like
Because
so
it's like you're left with more questions.
you were left with more questions. And in the book, it did feel to me, and again, I read this over a very long, I think it took me like a month to get through,
Hmm.
unfortunately, because I did really like this book.
Hmm.
But when we got to the end, I had a moment where I was like, were we talking about the treaty enough for this to be the ending? Like, I
Possibly not.
specifically
Well, because I
couldn't
think that that
remember.
was like one of the things that I wanted more of in the second book was like, I, for me, I really enjoyed the past timeline. Like that was
Yeah.
very interesting to me, but I wanted like more info there. Like I feel like I needed more info in certain places where it was like, this is very detailed, but I wanted less fighting and more information on like the backgrounds of some of the people. And I will say
Yeah.
in Queen Demon, we do get that. So we still have like the two timelines, but
Yeah.
one of like the past timeline goes farther into the past and gives us more
Ooh.
background. And the present timeline is obviously moving forward into the present slash future. So we're going opposite directions, if that makes sense, rather than
Okay.
like both continuing forward in the past timeline to meet up. We're going farther back into the past.
Okay.
And I do think we're getting some more background in
Okay.
Queen Demon.
Well, that leads us to a good thing of what can readers expect with Queen Demon, Laura? Give us a little bit of
So
highlights.
so here's the thing. I really loved Witch King so much.
Yes.
And I feel like listeners are going to think I'm being critical of Queen Demon. I really enjoyed Queen Demon. I did not enjoy it as much as Witch King, but I really enjoyed Queen Demon. It's like, it's hard for me to be, don't think I dislike this book. That's not what I'm getting at. I think for me, though, in Queen Demon, I very much enjoyed the past timeline, and
Okay.
the present timeline was a lot harder for me to get into.
Mm.
It seemed like it kind of drug on a little more. And like for the first portion of the book, first maybe 25%, I had a hard time kind of getting back into the book. Again, it's very complicated, but especially
Yes.
like that present timeline I was struggling with. And
Okay.
it felt a lot slower paced to me. The past timeline, I really enjoyed that and thought that that was like kind of perfect and what
Oh,
I wanted.
wow.
Like that, well, it was what I wanted, to pick up
Yeah.
from Witch King. And what we're dealing with basically is so like in this sequel, we're dealing with Kai and the crew. Basically, like Taran is like, or not Taran, Don believes like he's like, I know more about the hierarchs and like how they came to be because it seems like their origins are like very mysterious and they need to know more about them in order to combat them and figure out like what's going. They're in search of this well, this hierarch's well, and basically what happens is they're like, we are doing research to figure
Oh.
out how to get there. And we learn that knowledge comes at a cost and things get a little
Oh.
sticky. So, yeah, it's really, I mean, they eventually do get some answers and
Okay.
end up at a point where there is, this is my other gripe, it ends on a total cliffhanger. So,
Of course.
so so that is rough because I was kind of hoping we would get more information than we
Yeah.
do because there's again a lot of build up and then it ends on a cliffhanger. But I think my biggest problem with Queen Demon, it very much feels like a second book in the
Okay.
typical second book way where it's like
Yeah.
you have the first book which was really strong, the second book was good, but you can tell that this is just to get us to the next book, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
That makes total sense. And I mean, the second books are that way for a reason because you're
Yes.
plotting out an entire series. And so you're
That's
setting up the third book because it's
mhm.
easy to scene set. It's easy to finish. It's
We know
really
the
hard to get
characters.
there. Yes, like you're not getting the same wow factor. I do think it's interesting that Martha kind of took it on a like, ooh, let's go back further into the past because it does
Yes.
give that more like scene setting vibe that you want.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that that's probably why it worked for you more is it's like,
Yep.
oh, it's a second book where we're getting more details into what life we're looking
Hmm.
into. And then the current stuff is like, and we're still here, but a little bit
Yes.
further along. And you're like, okay, I guess."
Hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
think that
All
makes
of that
sense.
to say, it's not me saying that I didn't enjoy this book. That's not it at all. I very much enjoyed Queen Demon. I think I'm just very much getting the feels of this is a second book to get us
Mhm.
to the third book. And
Got it.
I think if you're someone who enjoyed Witch King, obviously continue with Queen Demon, you will enjoy it. But I think that there are people who were maybe like on the fence with Witch King and thinking I'll pick up Queen Demon to see if this is going to keep me going along. I question if those readers will still be continuing on with the series because in my mind I don't know that there's like enough like in the present timeline in my mind to like capture those readers who were struggling with Witch King to kind of bring them along, if that makes sense,
Okay. I think that makes sense.
to get
And I
people
think
on
it's a very
board.
honest review. So, um,
Yeah, I'm trying to be very honest with you listeners because I don't want everyone to just be like, Laura is so clouded with her love for Martha Wells that she cannot give an honest review. This is me being very honest that
yeah,
I think Queen Demon is a good book, but it suffers from middle book syndrome. And I don't know how readers who struggled with Witch King will handle Queen Demon.
the slowness of, I mean, maybe I'm the litmus test for it. So I'll have to
That could
read
be.
it and
I
see
think
what
you
I
will
think
enjoy it though,
because,
Hannah. Like
okay.
I, I I don't know that this is one that you would not enjoy. And you might enjoy it more. There were some people I saw online that were saying they enjoyed Queen Demon more than Witch King,
Okay.
that they thought it did a much better job. But they were also citing that they really liked the past timeline.
Uh,
So I think that that past timeline really gets a lot of people that they really love, like Martha's in-depth ness
okay.
in that
Yeah.
timeline
I,
specifically. But the
she's
other thing I
amazing at
noticed,
that.
there's also like a difference in Kai in the writing in this book, where I kind of felt like a tone shift almost with Kai, maybe kind
Oh,
of becoming a little more like stepping into a, not quite a leadership role, but like into his persona a little more. You know what I mean? I felt a bit of a tone shift with the character because we're always in Kai's POV,
interesting. Yeah.
but the writing felt a little bit different in terms of how Kai was represented, which was interesting.
Mm.
Not bad, just interesting.
Yeah, I'll be interested to read it. Um,
Absolutely.
do you have a favorite standout character in the second book that you were like, oh my God, I just love spending
I
time with
mean,
them?
still Kai.
Okay, it's okay. I was like, Hannah, he's the main character for a reason. Just trust me on
S-
this.
Still Kai.
Uh,
I do think though that like all of the characters, because we do have kind of like again this ragtag crew of people in both books that are working together, you know, to figure out what's going on with the hierarchs. I think all of the characters are very unique and you can find like things that you like about all of them. So
yeah.
I and they're really like it's such a detailed and expansive fantasy that I think you could spend a lot of time trying to like delve deep into like what is ZD and who is Taran or whatever to kind of figure out more about them. So yeah, I think that all of the characters are actually pretty well created and written.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I do like ZD a lot. I feel like we didn't get a
same.
ton with her, but I feel like she was a standout
Hmm.
person. And Sanja, it's always weird when you have like a little kid like join the ragtag group of people, but it did work for me in this book where like, they
I mean,
like sh
Sanja does fall into a lot of times that like explain some things to us
yeah,
as a character, which I can see being a little
not for
bit
everyone.
not for everyone, correct. But I do think there also is this like heartwarming nature to that character
Hmm.
and also kind of brings out the humanity in Kai as well.
Yes.
So and I also kind of appreciate having Sanja and then like the flashbacks to Kai Enna with like the recognition of Kai having been in a young girl's body and then interacting with this young girl. I thought that was interesting too. So there's more to Sanja than just being a plot witch.
Them being, I'm here for you to explain things to me. Thank you so much.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, I love that you got to read it. I can't wait to see what comes of the book. And everyone, make sure you're reading Witch King, so you can get the
Yes.
second book out yesterday. Like that's why we wanted to talk about this book
Hmm.
right now because I did read Witch King right before this came out,
Hmm.
specifically so we could talk about it. So, or I
And Martha,
finished
if
it.
you're listening, please come back to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, we would love to have you again. We'll hang out. We'll just chit chat TV
We'll
shows.
even watch Godzilla if you want.
We'll even we will redo fake fan fiction.
And you can write some fan fiction and
Oh
we
my
will read
gosh.
it.
Beautiful.
Also, there's another Murderbot coming out next year,
I
people, so
know.
strap in
Get ready. We'll be
because
covering it on the pod. We love when we get
yep,
to go back to Murderbot. It's a joy.
absolutely.
It's a treat. It's amazing. Well, thank you guys for listening along with us to discuss Witch King.
Yes.
Next week we are diving into Cat Valore's Revenge arc as Laura
Revenge
shifted.
arc.
We'll be covering half of it because it's a pretty
Hmm.
short book.
Yeah, it's a short
Um,
read.
so we'll be covering half next week and then half the week after, and then we will be having Kat on to discuss. So
Yay.
we are very excited for that. And please make sure that you are following along with us over at OWWR Pod on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok mostly, or you can email us any of your questions at ourpod@gmail.com. You can check out our website, ourpod.com, for some wonderful blog features that we've been having this year. We've done a great job
Hmm.
of highlighting some great
Yeah.
authors, so check it out over there.
We also
And
have a
if
Discord.
we have a Discord, please join. We want to talk about Taskmaster to people. Uh,
I created a channel, and I refuse to be the only one talking about Taskmaster
I
there.
I made a joke in there, so
I refuse to only talk to Hannah about this.
there's been a development in the lab.
Freaking love
A
this.
revelation. Wait, there's been a revelation in the lab.
Amazing.
And so please follow us over on Discord. And if you'll be so kind, please rate, review, and subscribe. It's a great way to get more people in. I will say that we had a
Hmm.
wonderful YouTube comment because I finally set up our
Hmm.
YouTube to post there. And someone wrote on there that made my day. They were like, this podcast deserves more views here. And I was like, oh, that
Oh,
was so kind.
thank you so
Um,
much.
so thank you to the people listening over on YouTube. We appreciate you, and I do see your comments. So
Oh,
very much
yeah.
appreciate.
And thanks
Laura,
for
I'll send
everyone
you a
listening
screenshot.
today.
Yeah, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.